Revealed, 9 haunted stories from the sinister depths of Appalachia that will terrify you. Sarah stepped into the chill of the night, her heart racing like a caged animal. The diner's neon flickered behind her, a final beacon of comfort in a world steeped in shadows. Hollow Creek had its secrets, and whispers floated through the air like ghosts. As she turned the ignition and the engine roared to life, unease crawled up her spine. That dark feeling had been haunting her lately, tightening like a noose with every passing day. What started as a murmur in the night was now a low growl, an omen lurking just out of sight. The moment she pulled onto the deserted road, headlights flared in her rearview mirror. They weren't just lights, no, they had a life of their own, an unsettling pulse that quickened her breath. Cold sweat trickled down her back as she realized someone was following her. The distance between them narrowed, the shadows coiling around her in a way she couldn't shake. She gripped the steering wheel, knuckles turning white as she forced her focus on the winding path, refusing to be consumed by fear. But the harder she tried, the more the panic twisted within her. It's just a wayward traveler, she told herself, even as the vehicle behind her loomed closer, not yielding an inch. She recalled the tales of the reclusive former sheriff, a man less of law and more veneer, a figure that drifted between legends and nightmares. He had spoken in hushed tones, warning of threats in the dark, shadows that hungered for lives long gone. Sarah's breath hitched. A shadow of his past could be closing in, and the notion sent icy tendrils down her spine, wrapping her in desperation. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Panic clawed at her throat as she swerved onto a forgotten side street. Memories of happier times flooded her thoughts, her children laughing, the sun shining on their faces. But those old houses lining the route creaked like bones in the night, echoes of abandonment catching the frigid breeze. It felt like the very ground beneath her feet was shifting, pulling her backward into shadows she thought buried. Long before her husband's dark history caught up with them, the car behind her pressed on, relentless, a specter from a life she had fought to escape. She knew that face, the way it haunted her dreams, a cruel reminder of everything threatening to unravel. Each blink of the headlights transformed into suffocating panic. She was being hunted, and those chilling memories were not just a figment of her imagination, they were creeping back, determined to bring her to her knees. Suddenly, it dawned on her, like an ice-cold bucket of water splashing over open flames, this wasn't merely about her. The man tailed her, hungry for the secrets that Hollow Creek had buried deep in its soil. As the headlights pulsed behind her, she saw not just a car, but the dark entity the town itself had become. Would she be its latest sacrifice, lost in the blood-stained history, or could she escape the sinister web before it ensnared her whole life? The thought sent a jolt of fear through her veins, and as the trees whispered warnings around her, Sarah gunned the engine, racing against the inevitable night closing in around her. The road twisted like a snake, uneven and flecked with shadows, each curve threatening to unearth her deepest fears. Sarah pressed the accelerator, her heart hammering against her ribs, an animal trapped in panic. The headlights behind her were no longer just lights, they were a predator, relentless and hungry. They pierced the darkness, mocking her with their brilliance, a reminder that escape was slipping through her fingers. As the trees loomed closer, limbs reaching out like skeletal hands, Sarah's mind flickered with memories, her husband's face, twisted in rage, the sound of shattering glass, the way escape had felt both thrilling and terrifying all those years ago. The road stretched endlessly ahead, a sinister corridor guiding her deeper into the night. Her grip tightened on the steering wheel, her knuckles white, her breaths coming in shallow gasps. There was a dark revelation lurking behind her, a reminder that she couldn't outrun her past forever. Suddenly, something flashed in her rearview mirror. A figure, pale and gaunt, seemed to emerge from the vehicle behind. Had she imagined it? No, It was there, hovering, its face obscured yet somehow familiar. A shiver ran down her spine, a bone-deep recognition flickering in the corners of her mind. She remembered the hours spent over dusty archives in the library, poring over photos of long-forgotten townsfolk. Had that figure been one of them? A chill rushed through her, making her question her sanity. She veered left again, the car's tires screeching against the gravel, flinging dirt into the air. The headlights behind her followed suit, relentless, like a dark shadow stalking its prey. Her eyes darted between the road and the rearview mirror, desire to escape battling with a rising sense of dread. The closer the figure became, the heavier her heart felt, each beat echoing louder in her ears, a countdown as ominous as a clock ticking down to midnight. Ahead, she could see a clearing, a faint glow piercing through the trees. It might be a way out, or perhaps a trap set by whatever hunted her. A ghostly light lured her in, promising safety but threatening all the same. She longed for any sign of life, any warmth, but as she drew nearer, the unease settled into her bones. A graveyard of memories whispered through the wind, warning her of the consequences of her choices. The car came to a shuddering stop just outside the clearing, where a dilapidated barn stood, the wood aged and cracking like bones under the weight of secrets. The headlights of her pursuer blazed right behind her, blinding her for a moment, giving her a false sense of clarity. As she stepped out, breath visible in the air, the chill reached into her soul. The barn's door hung ajar, creaking softly, inviting her in with the promise of shelter, or was it more malevolent? Without thinking, she darted toward the barn, shackles of fear wrapping tighter around her legs with each step. Inside, shadows swirled, thick and palpable. Heart pounding in her throat, she pressed against the wall, ears straining for any sound. The car behind her idled, then abruptly fell silent. Would they follow her into this hollowed space? Would she become just another ghost trapped in Hollow Creek's saga? Darkness enveloped her, swallowing the world whole, and from somewhere deep within the barn, a low hum thrummed, a sound both familiar and terrifying. It echoed like a siren's call, teasing her with its cadence. The past wove itself into the present, and she knew then that the secrets from Hollow Creek were not just buried, they were awakening. But who or what awaited her in the shadows? As she stood frozen, unsure of the next move, a flicker caught her eye. Something moved in the dark, gliding toward her. The flicker grew, morphing from shadow into shape, a silhouette that twisted and writhed like smoke. Sarah's breath hitched, her heart drumming in her ears. The low hum turned into whispers, fragmented words slicing through the darkness, a chorus of mournful voices. "Help us, remember." They beckoned, and her pulse quickened in response, feelings of dread and curiosity clashing like violent winds. Straining her eyes, she peered deeper into the barn. The sound echoed like a heartbeat against the wooden walls, pulsing with an unsettling rhythm. The thing approaching was neither human nor entirely unearthly. It shimmered, shifting between forms, occasionally striking her with hints of familiarity that made her skin crawl. Instinctively, Sarah took a step back, her back pressing against the splintered wood behind her. "Who are you?" she gasped, though her voice felt lost among the shadows, swallowed whole by the oppressive black. Each whisper seemed to respond as the darkness thickened, swirling around her, a tight noose of dread closing in. With every flicker of movement in the corners of her vision, she could feel her past clawing at her. She thought of her husband and the horrors they had tried to escape. The barn felt alive now, breathing, the wood creaked with age, a sentinel to secrets left to rot. It held memories, more than just her own. Did those figures in the flicker know her story? Did they reflect the lives of the townsfolk who vanished into the depths of time, their souls trapped like moths caught in webs of despair? A sharp crash broke through her reverie, a noise from outside. The headlights had turned off, but now footsteps crunched on gravel, slow and deliberate, creeping toward the barn. Panic clawed at her throat. She needed to move. The whispers intensified, growing louder, urging her to remember, to see. But all she wanted was to escape. Suddenly, the figure stepped from the swirling shadows. It loomed larger than life, its form coalescing into a figure she recognized: pale skin, hollowed cheeks, and the unmistakable eyes that burned with a familiar fire. "You shouldn't have come back, Sarah," it croaked, the voice grating against her ears like nails dragging across glass. It was the woman from the old photographs, the librarian, who had shared stories of Hollow Creek until the day she vanished. "Was it you who led me here?" Sarah felt the words spill out, each syllable weighing heavy like stones in her pockets. "Why are you haunting this place?" The figure only pointed, a skeletal finger extending toward the barn's rear corner where darkness smudged the light. From that void, the pulse of voices reached a fever pitch, vibrating within her skull. "You have to face it. You need to know." At that moment, another noise emerged from behind her heavy footsteps, menacing and determined, cutting through the shadows, ready to reclaim what was lost. Sarah's stomach dropped. The moment felt electric and suffocating. Dimensions blurred, she didn't know what awaited her outside, yet something pushed her toward the corner, the palpable weight of the figure's command overwhelming her senses. With one last look at the spectral librarian, Sarah steeled herself for whatever lay within the darkness, looking for answers that might ground her in this dreadful reality or drag her deeper into the nightmares of Hollow Creek. As she stepped forward, every nerve in her body ignited with a warning, but the compulsion to uncover the truth outweighed the dread. But what truth would she unearth, and would it lead her to salvation or horror? The darkness swallowed her whole, a thick haze that clung to her skin like a damp fog. Sarah could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes upon her, each one pricking her consciousness with curiosity and hopelessness. Ahead, the shadowy corner of the barn bloomed darkness, as if it were a living creature, pulsating with the rhythm of the whispers now roaring in her ears. Thoughts raced through her mind, urgent and frantic. Face it, remember. They drifted in and out of focus, flickering with her own memories, taunting her with images she struggled to grasp. The edges of panic clawed deeper into her chest, tightening her breath. She was no longer just Sarah, a woman seeking shelter from her past. She was a vessel for the sorrows of Hollow Creek, an echo of lost voices in search of solace. As she stepped closer to the barn's shadow, her heart thumped loudly against her ribcage. What would she find there? Would it reveal the truth behind the figures that haunted her dreams? She swallowed hard, gathering courage as the librarian's hollow gaze bore into her back. Just as she neared the opaque blackness, a violent crash erupted from outside, rattling the very foundations of the barn. Wood creaked ominously, and the ground shook, as if something ancient and powerful was awakening within. The whispers shifted to frantic pleas, the voices converged into a singular wail of desperation. "Sarah!" That wasn't a whisper. The sound was clear, sharp, slicing through the madness like a blade. She turned her head sharply towards the door. The footsteps were louder now, crashing against gravel, and the voices outside were echoing her name. Figures loomed against the dim light filtering through the barn's cracks, shadows stretching and twisting like snakes. The dread in her gut twisted tighter. "Get out!" A voice shouted, urgent and terrified, unmistakably her husband's. She had tried to shield him from this place, from the nightmares that clung to her being. Had he followed her? "Stay away!" She screamed back, her voice trembling. "You don't understand." Just as she reached for the corner, her hand brushing against the cold wood, something shifted behind her. The figure of the librarian grew more defined, her eyes flaring with intensity. "No! You'll lose him. You have to choose." Sarah's heart raced, caught in a hurricane of choice. She could dive deeper into the darkness, surrender herself to the haunting of memories long buried, or retreat to her husband, a tether to a life before Hollow Creek. A life she feared was slipping through her fingers. "Sarah! Come back!" His voice broke through the chaos again, closer this time. She could almost feel the warmth of his body, the safety of his embrace. But the shadows in the corner pulsed with a different kind of promise, seductive and disturbing. It begged her to reveal what lay within. She hesitated, feeling the power of the darkness push against her. Whispers swirled around her, thick and suffocating. "You have to remember, you have to choose." In that split second, Sarah knew the truth. The shadows would not just reveal a memory, they would consume her entirely. Yet could she bear to lose the one piece of happiness that tethered her to reality? The choice smashed into her heart like a freight train, and Sarah was left standing on the precipice of salvation and despair, the barn yawning wide before her, her husband's footsteps closing in. Shadows writhed, and a terrible truth began to dawn. As she took a breath, ready to make the impossible choice, the entire barn shuddered violently, and the air thickened. Something or someone was coming, and Sarah had to decide, would she embrace the darkness or fight to escape? In that moment, the lurking dread split her mind like a fracture. One path led to discovery, the other, perhaps, to doom. With a final glance back toward the swirling shadows, the choice loomed upon her like the fallout of a storm yet to break. The moment she inhaled, a heavy fog filled her lungs, burning like acid. An electric current of anxiety shot through her body, every nerve alive with terror. She peered between her fingers, half expecting the shadows to stretch out and seize her, dragging her into their depths. The whispers swirled, rising and falling away like tides, intoxicating her with a dizzying blend of fear and curiosity. "Stop!" Sarah shouted, her voice unsteady yet desperate. "I don't want any of this." "Sarah!" He was even closer now, his voice a lifeline, fraying on the ends. "Get out of there!" The sinister darkness before her answered with a gut-wrenching silence, merging seamlessly with the decay of the barn. Shadows danced in rhythm, daring her to step closer. The librarian's gaze was piercing, her face taut with an urgency that made the hairs on the back of Sarah's neck stand up. "Choose before it chooses for you." The word struck her like iron rivets, each syllable demanding action. The darkness beckoned, intoxicating and familiar. It whispered half-remembered promises of things left unsaid, the pain claimed by voiceless memories. But behind it, her husband's calls crashed against her ears like waves, steadying her against the tide of memories threatening to pull her under. With trembling hands, she clenched her fists, torn between the solace of known horrors and the chaos of the light. "Help me!" She cried out, but her voice was swallowed, consumed by the void that enveloped her. She turned to the barn door, wanting nothing more than to flee this place, but the darkness shuddered in response. The very walls twisted as if alive, the wood groaning and shifting like sentient flesh. One last hope flared in her chest at the thought of her husband, the warmth of his smile chasing away the freezing dread. "You have to believe me!" she shouted, more to the shadows than herself, and then, a sharp crack echoed from within the barn. It thundered against her consciousness. A blend of voices erupted, overlapping, drowning her in murmurs of sorrow and betrayal. "Join us," they beckoned. A chorus of agony, a symphony of despair, taunting her with half-formed memories that kept slipping away just as she thought she could grasp them. "Sarah, please." A softer voice cut through the cacophony. It was her husband's, edged with an imploring tenderness that sent waves of guilt crashing through her. Would she abandon him to whatever malevolence was lurking inside? Would she turn her back on his love for the siren's song of past suffering? Heart pounding, she took a step backward, her instinct screaming for her to escape. She had to break free from the clutches of the barn's growing darkness. The librarian's chill expression twisted into a frown, her eyes narrowing defiantly. "You don't remember, it will take you." Sarah's breath quickened. She felt as if the barn was shrinking, the totality of her fears pushing her closer to the shadows. A dark, grasping hand swirled through the tendrils of night, reaching for her, fingers adorned with whispers of lost souls, clawing at her sanity. "Sacrifice!" hissed the librarian, her lips curling with dark delight. "Everything has a price." As the walls thudded violently once more, Sarah spun around, feeling the gravity shift. Her choice loomed closer, the warmth of her husband fading as the voices climbed back into crescendo, a malignant melody invading her thoughts. "Please!" she cried, the last thread of her resolve fraying. "Don't take me." But then the ground beneath her feet rumbled, a tremor signaling the barn's awakening. The shadows surged like boiling water, and the air thickened with impending doom. The screams inside her head reached fever pitch, leaving her breathless. In a definitive moment, her heart twisted painfully, caught between two realms. The warmth of her husband's voice faded, shadows creeping forward with wicked intent. The choice was upon her with a weight like lead. Would she plunge into the darkness, discovering the secrets long buried, or could she break free and confront the chaos threatening to ensnare everything she loved? A piercing shriek sliced through the air, and as she looked back, the librarian stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with wicked clarity. "Your time is running out, Sarah." With a final glance back to the gaping maw of shadows ready to swallow her whole, the tremors beneath her feet grew even more violent. The decision was no longer hers. What awaited Sarah in the depths of despair, and would she escape what haunted her? Panic clawed at Sarah's throat as she swayed under the oppressive weight of dread. The librarian's voice twisted inside her mind, echoing like a death knell. There was no waiting now. The shadows flickered and pulsed like angry fireflies, demanding tribute, a choice. "Just run." Her husband cried, desperation saturating his every word, but her muscles were frozen, caught between a primal instinct to flee and the sinister allure of the dark. She could feel it now, invasive tendrils weaving through her thoughts, unraveling her defenses. A whisper here, a soft sob there. Faces of those lost flitted through her memory as if taunting her with reminders of the past. "Sarah, focus on me." He was a beacon of light, his voice tethering her in the storm of chaos. She jolted, tearing her gaze from the suffocating darkness back to him. "I'm so scared." It was a sob, raw and vulnerable. Fear pooled in her stomach, coiling tight. "Just hold on," he yelled, and the promise in those words gave her the strength to tear her gaze from the abyss for just a moment longer. Without thinking, she took a shaky step backward. The barn responded like a predator roused from sleep, its walls vibrating, hungry and eager. The sound of creaking would send chills racing up her spine. The whispers surged again, more vivid now, enthralling her with images, seductive promises of relief from the pain she had buried deep inside. "Sarah," the librarian hissed, eyes aglow with a madness that could lure anyone into the dark, "come to us. We'll set you free." The fog thickened, suffocating and filled with the smell of decay. Behind her, shadows whirled in a chaotic dance, beckoning her closer, inviting, seductive, insidious. Sarah felt herself swaying, drawn to the murky depths while the air grew thick with the cries of broken dreams. "Sarah!" Her husband shouted again, his voice clawing through the dense fog. "Don't listen to them." The panic surged once more. She turned to run, but the ground beneath her feet morphed into soft, giving earth quicksand of emotion and memory. She stumbled, her heart hammering in her chest, entrapped in the clash between light and dark. Then, with a sickening realness, the grasp of a shadowy hand wrapped around her ankle, pulling her toward the floor, toward the whispers, now crescendoing into haunting wails. "Join us," they cried. "No!" She screamed, ripping free, the sensation like pulling away from ice. But momentum betrayed her as the walls of the barn twisted, contorting like grotesque spectators of her demise. Every swelling shadow grew sharper, eager to consume her. Suddenly, a glimmer ignited in her mind, a memory, a flickering snapshot of a laughter-filled night, an innocent touch that felt distant. Her husband's face appeared in vivid relief amidst the murky haze, a torch cutting through the night. "I love you." At that moment, she could almost hear him, feel the warmth of his hand in hers, the vibrant joy they had shared. But just as quickly, the grip of shadows tightened, dragging her toward an irrevocable fate. In a rush of adrenaline, she made a choice. She threw herself backward, her heart pounding, tearing through the chorus of ghosts. A final plea echoed in her mind, "Not today. I'm not yours." All the while, the librarian's laughter rang in her ears, mocking, satisfied. "You cannot outrun the truth, Sarah. It will find you in the end." A blinding light flashed behind her eyes as she collided with something solid. She tumbled into the barn's cold embrace, the darkness clawing at her edges like jagged teeth. And then, silence enveloped her, a suffocating void where dread wrapped around her being. What lay beyond the veil of darkness, and what memories would resurface? Would the truth devour her whole, or would it set her free? Her breath caught in her throat as her world tilted again, spiraling into something far worse than mere shadows. The sensation of falling smothered her awareness, a heavy and dark cloak that wouldn't let go. Panic clawed at her as she landed hard on something unyielding. Pain shot through her body, mingling with confusion. The silence was all-consuming, thick and oppressive, casting her into a void where even dread seemed to cower. "Sarah!" Her husband's voice echoed from somewhere distant, growing fainter. "Where are you?" The darkness twisted, forming shapes that writhed and shifted in her peripheral vision. She blinked, forcing herself to focus on the haze. Instinct screamed at her to get up, to run, but tendrils of despair snaked around her mind, whispering promises of safety and relief in tones that felt almost familiar. She pushed against the ground, struggling to find her footing, her heart racing like a runaway train. Shadows crawled closer, their yearning voices drowning her thoughts in a chilling lullaby. "Join us, we can make it all go away, no no." She choked out the words, desperate to break free from the grip of despair. Memories surged, unbidden flashes of laughter, the warmth of her husband's hand, the mundane troubles of everyday life. But they paled against the seductive whispers of the shadows, a haunting reminder of pain she had tried to bury. Remember the way it felt? They were coaxing, wrapping around her heart like a vice. The truth behind the joy? The pain you've hidden? Each word felt like a dagger, twisting deeper into her psyche. The barn around her began to shift, walls leaning in, warped and mocking. "See what you've lost? See what you could reclaim enough?" Sarah shouted, forcing the noise from her throat, her voice breaking the spell that bound her. She crawled forward, fingertips digging into splintered wood as she fought against the clutches of the dark. "You don't own me." The shadows recoiled as if struck, a retreat that sent a ripple of confusion through the air. For just a heartbeat, the whispers faltered. It gave her just enough time. With a surge of willpower, she pushed up to her feet, her heart pounding against the jagged bones of fear. "Sarah!" Her husband's voice groaned, now clouded with urgency and raw pain. "Where are you? I can't see you." She turned, seeking him through the dark murk that permeated every inch of the barn. "I'm here. I'm trying." But as she reached, the ground beneath her buckled again, a dark wave sweeping her away like a fallen leaf caught in a storm. A new fear gripped her. Was this it? Was this dark, tightly woven fabric a living entity hungry to consume her? Her breath came faster, short and shallow. She didn't want to breathe in this stench of decay and drowning pasts. With a primal scream, she leaped forward, forcing her way through the thick fog. Each step felt like a battle, but she could almost feel the warmth of her husband's presence drawing near. And then a flicker of light. For a moment, the barn's darkness receded like a tide, and there he was, his silhouette barely breaking the shadowy veil. "Sarah!" But the shadows writhed angrily at her feet, rising to snatch her back. They hissed in a horrible pitch, longing to drag her into oblivion. In that instant, she knew she had to make a decision. Would she risk everything to reach him, to escape this nightmare, or would she be swallowed whole? "Take my hand, Sarah." His voice was clear, a lifeline in a sea of chaos. The shadows writhed with fury, desperate to reclaim her. Fear flooded her veins, but she wouldn't be trapped. Not again. With all her might, she lunged toward that glimmer of hope. Would she reach him in time? Or was she doomed to remain shackled in the chains of darkness forever? Just as her fingertips grazed his, a chilling roar echoed through the barn, a sound that could only belong to something ancient and malevolent. "What will it cost you to escape?" It gnarled. And with that, the abyss yawned wide, ready to consume her entire world. The darkness exploded around her, a distortion of shadows twisted into a loud, unsettling cacophony that overwhelmed her senses. The air thickened, charged with an electricity that felt like the prelude to a storm. She could barely breathe, each gasp clawing at her throat. "Sarah." Her husband's voice cracked, distant but echoing through the twilight of terror. She didn't know if she was still falling or if the ground had risen to meet her in this nightmare that felt all too real. "Hold on." She thought she heard him say again, but the shadows drew near, swirling with predatory intent. They were everywhere, wrapping her in their damp embrace. Forcing herself to stand, she felt the weight of despair clawing at her mind, a relentless grip that urged her to succumb. Yet the flicker of warmth she had seen his presence anchored her. With every ounce of strength, she reached for him, the shadows hissing as they snatched at her ankles, desperate to pull her back. "Let go!" she yelled, her voice a knife slicing through the dark fabric. She tore free and stumbled toward the light, her heart pounding like thunder in her ears. In that moment of desperate clarity, the barn began to shift. The walls collapsed, folding like origami into grotesque shapes that seemed to stretch toward her ominously. The floor creaked and groaned beneath her feet like the bony fingers of something alive, clawing from below. "Sarah." His voice twisted through the darkness, becoming almost unrecognizable. Panic rose like bile in her throat. Each step toward him felt like wading through molasses, the thick darkness trying to drown her resolve, but the light pulsed in the distance, a beacon that urged her on despite the crushing dread. The ground heaved again, a violent lurch that sent her tumbling. She scrambled to her feet, heart racing as the whispers gathered strength, murmuring promises of forgotten happiness. "Stay with us, forget him, join us, no," she cried, shaking her head. She felt tears sting her eyes, a mixture of fear and fierce determination. They were lies, temptations wrapped in shadows. "I won, to be lost again." She launched herself forward again as the shrieks grew louder, the shadows turning vicious, lunging at her like wolves. Just a few more steps, she thought, fighting to keep her focus. As the darkness reached for her, they were thwarted by sharp fingers of light that pushed back, revealing more of her husband's silhouette. "Sarah. Now. Take my hand." His voice rang with urgency as the shadows recoiled, their edges fraying in agitation. The moment felt electric, charged with the weight of their shared history. She could almost feel his hand, warm and reassuring, waiting just a breath away. Then, the ground cracked violently beneath her. The barn shook, and with it, the reality of her surroundings swirled like a maelstrom. She watched helplessly as her husband's form flickered, wavering like a mirage in the distance. Was that a trick of the light? "Don't believe them." A voice inside her warned, a whisper against the chaos. The shadows howled, their voice a dissonant hum that vibrated in her bones, threatening to rend her sanity as they pulled at her with ghostly hands. "Join us, you belong with us." Sarah's heart raced to a fever pitch. She teetered on the edge of despair, caught between two worlds. Her breath came in quick gasps, almost choking her. The fractures in her reality widened, threatening to engulf her entirely. "Please." She begged the darkness, even as panic clawed at her. "Don't take me." But the abyss pushed back with relentless fury, the roar anew like thunder crashing in her ears, drowning out everything she loved. "Take my hand." He shouted one last time, desperation etched into his voice. Just as she lunged forward, determined to grasp his outstretched hand, an ear-splitting crack echoed once more. The barn swayed, and for a breathless second, everything hung in a balance. At that instant, shadows flared bright, their glow white-hot, illuminating the dark figures around her. Then, a face loomed in the darkness, twisted, judgmental, and grinning. "Sacrifice is the only path forward," it whispered, and in that moment, she felt the world fade around her. What was she willing to lose? In the last heartbeat, with the oppressive weight of choice and fear hanging like a noose around her neck, she closed her eyes and reached into the abyss. What awaited her on the other side? The shadows swallowed her whole, the light fading to an echoing memory. Sarah felt the cold grip of darkness close in, suffocating her will. She gasped, her lungs desperately searching for air as visions of her husband danced just out of reach. "Where are you?" she whispered into the void, the silence absorbing her words. It wasn't the silence that terrified her, it was what lurked behind it. Sarah awoke, if awoke was the right word. She was no longer in the barn but suspended in a twilight haze, the air thick like fog. Ghostly figures drifted past her, shadows of what once were. They didn't notice her, didn't care. Their hollow eyes searched the distance, eternally waiting for something that would never arrive. Confusion tore at her. Was this some kind of purgatory? A realm where lost souls drifted endlessly, forever haunted by their regrets? Sarah, that familiar voice cut through the fog, pulling her like a lifeline. "James!" she screamed, desperation choking her. "Where are you?" The figures shifted, heads turning to her with vacant expressions. The darkness curled like smoke, swirling around her feet. She fought against it, pushing forward, hoping to find him, hoping to tear through this prison of despair. Here the voice was softer now, like a gentle breeze, leading her through the mist. But as she followed, dread knotted in her stomach. Memory flashed unbidden, his laughter, their home, the smell of his cologne mixed with the crisp autumn air. Is he all right? The thought was a cold poke of fear in her chest. What if he is trapped in here too? The shadows thickened, wrapping tighter as whispers spiraled, a cacophony of promises. "Sarah, you belong with us, no?" she shouted, shaking her head. The figures advanced, their fingers reaching out, grasping at the last threads of her defiance. The whispers rose higher, becoming a singular voice, a chant that drummed in her ears with every beat of her heart. Racing forward, she pressed against the wave of shadows, each step heavier than the last, as the ground beneath became soft like quicksand. "I want to join you," she gasped, forcing herself onward despite the weight of despair tugging at her limbs. "Sarah!" There it was again, drifting through the air, a whisper so warm it ignited hope. She pushed through the fog, toward the sound. Then she saw him. James emerged from the haze, his face pale but determined, a beacon in the ever-consuming darkness. "Don't let go!" he cried, reaching out, his hand trembling. But beside him, as she drew closer, her heart sank. A dark figure loomed behind him, shadowy and massive, eyes glinting like coals. It enveloped him, arms stretching wide like a vice, a predator closing in on its prey. "Don't look back!" he yelled, terror etched in his features. "James!" "No!" The shadows began to swirl violently around her, a tempest of grief and anger. The dark figure contorted, mocking her with its sinister grin, a jester in this twisted carnival of despair. She backed away, but the ground beneath her churned, shifting rapidly like a sinking ship. "Leave him be!" she screamed. Panic rippled through her. She had to fight back. The whispering could not take him. With sheer will, Sarah launched a desperate charge at the dark figure. "I'll tear you apart!" she howled, every ounce of energy fueled by the love she thought lost. But as she neared it, the darkness rippled and laughed, a sound that slithered into her ears like icy fingertips. "No one escapes," it hissed, and the world around her spun violently, time fractured, the edges of reality blurring as she felt herself being pulled apart, stretched between existence and nothingness. She looked back at James, eyes wide, hands reaching desperately for her. The shadows closed in with a final, deafening rush. And then silence. What had she sacrificed? What must she confront now, alone in this haunting abyss? "Will you join us, Sarah?" The darkness cooed, its voice curling around her like smoke. It was a choice, a question posed between two worlds, but the echoes of James's pleas laced her mind. "Face the truth," it continued, its sound barely a whisper now. But was the truth still out there? In that suffocating moment of doubt, one thought resonated louder than all the others. would she give up everything for a chance to save him? And that was when the ground beneath her began to tremble once more. The tremors escalated in intensity, shaking Sarah to her core, rattling the very essence of her being. She stared into the abyss, her resolve hardening. "I will not be a pawn in this game any longer." She shouted into the darkness, her voice reverberating like thunder. With each proclamation, the shadows twisted as if momentarily perturbed by her defiance. The dark figure growled, thread-like tendrils weaving in and out of its form, but Sarah stood her ground, mugging her fear. She could feel James's presence pulsing like a heartbeat in the gloom, urging her forward. "Don't let go. We have to fight it together." The urgency in her husband's voice anchored her, giving her strength despite the chaos swirling around her. The ground beneath her feet shifted beneath the dark figure's weight. Maybe it was the timbre of their love, a bond that transcended this malignant waltz of shadows. It filled her lungs, fueling the fire in her determination. She charged at the figure, fists clenched, heart racing like a caged beast breaking free. "I choose love." With a strength unfathomable, she shoved her fear aside, letting the love for James blaze bright within her. "Enough of your games!" she roared. The darkness recoiled, sanity crackling like firework sparks in the air. Shadows swirled violently, angry and confused, caught off guard by the power of her conviction. Sarah pressed closer, feeling the boundary of light flicker on the periphery as it burst forth like a star igniting a tired sky, and then she saw him, James, flickering through the shifting chaos, eyes steadfast and pleading. Rushing toward him, she could hardly grasp this immense wave of hope drowning out the whispers surrounding her. "Hold on!" she cried again, pushing through the tempest that lashed at her sides like claws. They came together, fingers interlocking, warmth igniting like a flash of brilliance against the darkness. "We can break this!" James shouted, the energy between them intensifying, blooming like fireworks illuminating the dark. "Together!" they declared in unison, and with that proclamation, their combined love surged out, blasting like a shockwave. The dark figure shrieked a horrifying sound that echoed through the air, reverberating with loss and despair. The shadows around them cracked, dissolving into wisps of smoke that receded back into the blackness as if fearful of the light. With each heartbeat, the barriers that had separated them weakened, reality began to shift, the barn warping and splintering under the weight of their love. "Keep believing!" James shouted, his grip tightening as they carved a path through the encroaching shadow. "I'm here!" Sarah shouted back, her heart ablaze with a fierce determination that belied the grasp of fear still lurking within her. Together, they took the steps toward the light, a radiant glow beckoning them forward, promising freedom from the haunted past, and then with a final burst of emotion the darkness shattered, light rushed in like a tidal wave, crashing around them, spilling joy and vibrancy back into their world. The moans of memories and lost souls exploded into radiant echoes, freeing every single shadow that once ensnared them. The barn dissolved into mere particles of light, illuminating their path as the remnants faded into nothingness. In the next heartbeat, Sarah found herself standing in the lush green field outside Hollow Creek, the sun rising in glorious hues of orange and pink, bathing the town in warmth and solace. James stood beside her, confusion, relief, and a fresh flicker of hope lighting up his eyes. "We did it," he whispered, almost in disbelief. "Together," Sarah replied, feeling the weight of the past lifting from her shoulders like a fading echo. They turned toward each other, the bond forged stronger than any darkness. With a soft smile, they quietly reaffirmed their commitment to a life full of new beginnings. As they walked, hand in hand, the town of Hollow Creek lay before them, no longer a lifeless husk, but alive with possibility and healing. The whispers of the lost were finally free, scattering through the air like fallen leaves in autumn, whispering tales of rebirth and second chances. With the sun shining above, signaling their new beginning, Sarah looked forward to a life filled with laughter and love, where the shadows of the past wouldn't haunt them anymore. Together, they had outwitted the darkness. Together, they could forge ahead. Now it was time to embrace the light, untouched by the horrors bereaved before. If you found yourself gripped by this haunting tale and want to dive into more chilling, heart-pounding stories like Sarah and James's, you need to subscribe now. Hit that bell and select all notifications so you never miss out. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm beast. And don't hold back, flood the comments section with your thoughts, reactions, and theories. Your voice matters. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how love can triumph over darkness. Don't wait even one more second to tell others what happens next. This is the moment to show your support.